I'm now going to provide you with a summary of what we discovered around the dashboard framework based on the process and project analysis. As a reminder, the first phase was to take a look at the processes. We took the core processes and listed them across the top, and down the left side we listed the strategic objectives. And at each intersection point where each process had an interaction with each strategic objective, we scored its impact and performance. Our purpose for doing this was to identify everywhere where there's a 5, a significant impact. In other words, if this process failed, it would put in jeopardy our ability to succeed at this strategic objective. This analysis identifies where it is we need to provide measures in the drill down dashboards. This work came up with the following answer. So for design, develop, and deliver products and services, there are 1, 2, 3 areas where it has a significant or critical impact on our strategies, and we need measures. What it also provides us is that horizontal view. It gives leadership the chance to take a look at each strategic objective and understand if we're not achieving the performance levels we're looking for, what critical processes might be driving that performance. So everywhere there's a light blue square here is somewhere where we need to find a performance indicator to provide that information to leadership. In fact, the work that we did disclosed the indicators we needed for 2 of those core processes, and the rest are being done over the next week as homework by the project team. We did the same thing with the projects. Now, it's important to note that we're looking at the projects in which T&O is trying to improve how they perform. We call these projects where we're working on the business, as opposed to your daily activities where you're dealing with customer-facing projects where you're working in the business. So on the business projects include things like the development and implementation of your new EPPM, and even this new scorecard analytics refresh are working on the business. So we came up with a project list of the current activities that are undergoing. And we had an interesting discussion here because many of these projects have longer term impacts. In other words, we're committing resources and activities to it now, but we're not going to see benefits in the short term. Now, the same analysis was completed where we took a look at each of these projects and we tried to analyze not only how many resources was it consuming, but where it would impact against those strategic objectives. And the darker the blue, the higher the impact. So for example, if we take a look at this project here, you can see that it has a significant impact on the business. There's 3 5s in its impact framework. And again, where there's a higher impact, that's where we need to report back this project's performance against those strategic objectives. So that gives us the framework we need to build the dashboards. Now, out of interest, we can also plot these projects just like we plotted the gaps that the processes left behind. So these red dots represent the amount of project focus we have in each of these areas. So for example, against the strategic objective F1, maintain cost control, the red dot is down here. So we have some projects, but they don't have a significant impact. On the other hand, if you take a look at F2, valuation of risk exposure, there's even less projects involved. If we come over here to employee capabilities, there's a significant number of projects that likely have a good impact. Now, this is likely up here for what we call unintended consequences. As I'm working on other projects, inevitably it has an impact on building employee capabilities. So this is not surprisingly high. I'll just show you where these red dots come from by going to the previous slide. So what we're doing is we're adding up horizontally to chart that dot against, for example, maintain cost control. So you can see here we've got a 5, a 2, a 4, a 2, and a 2. And it's that score that creates this red dot. Now, remember, we're launching these projects to close these performance gaps in the organization. Remember from the previous phase, the gold bars represent the gap between how the processes currently perform and what the strategy calls for. So those projects should be lined up with those gold bars. So let's combine those two charts and see what we see. Now, this is typical of what we see in many clients. In some, like maintain cost control, there's a good relationship. And cost control often has that kind of footprint because it's so visible. Employee capabilities, again, we see the red dot significantly above the gold bar. But again, that's normal because of what we call unintended consequences. Where we have issues are things like C1, where it looks like we have a larger gap than the relative investment we have in projects. Likewise, in continually optimize our costs, it also looks like we may be slightly lower than we would like to see. So again, this isn't core to the analytics review, but it is core to management's job in ensuring that the projects that you're sponsoring are lined up with the strategic gaps and are working on closing those gaps. From here, the team is going to go off and begin building the dashboards around the detailed metrics for each of the processes and projects. The next phase of work will be taking a look at productivity. And when we look at productivity, we'll be looking at those process blue bars and the gold bars and begin determining the productivity of people at addressing those strategic needs.